Leonor's crown tested by one forbidden pact. A crown gleams beneath muted chandeliers, the gold cold but unmistakably alive. The faintest tremor of reflection moves across its surface, echoing centuries of oaths and obligations. Each jewel, each filigree, is more than ornament, it is a ledger of promises, some spoken, some deliberately left unrecorded. Here, in this chamber, the weight of history presses against every step, every breath, and the air itself seems to hum with expectation. Continuity is not abstract here, it is embodied in visible presence, in the disciplined posture of a young heir who must reconcile public duty with private uncertainty. The corridors beyond are lined with portraits, their painted eyes tracking the passage of time, witnesses to decisions that shaped law, succession, and national identity. National identity is woven into these rituals, visible in every measured gesture, every protocol observed without question. It is not merely ceremony, it is the scaffold of authority, the living thread of continuity that ties the present to a narrative older than memory. Even before the first crisis, there is a subtle tension in the air. One secret, one pact, could ripple outward and unsettle structures that have remained stable for centuries. The world beyond the palace notices. Diplomats in Washington, London, Ottawa, Canberra, Berlin, they sense the signal, and each interprets it through the lens of their own institutional calculus. Prestige, credibility, and authority are all quietly evaluated, as if the crown itself were under subtle audit. By minute 2, the question surfaces without preamble: what is the cost of obedience when the price is unseen? What does it mean to honor a legacy that asks more than it gives, that whispers of obligations not yet spoken? Continuity demands sacrifice. Duty is unyielding. Desire is subordinated. Yet the human dimension persists, silent, shadowed, and dangerous in its absence. The pact itself is enigmatic, documented only in fragments, its contours deliberately blurred. Some know, some only suspect, and the rest are bound by law, tradition, and discretion. Every acknowledgement or denial carries weight, every delay in disclosure has consequence. To bend or misinterpret its terms is to threaten not just a crown, but the perception of stability itself. Institutions do not forgive error easily. Continuity is fragile when secrecy collides with obligation. At minute 8, the unresolved becomes a question of governance. There are rooms where decisions are made in hushed tones, where advisors speak in hypotheticals, yet every statement is measured against historical precedent. Each global observer interprets the scene differently. In Berlin, it is a question of constitutional propriety. In Ottawa, of the subtle interplay between ceremonial symbolism and real power. In London, a study in inherited authority. In Washington, an assessment of geopolitical signaling. These reactions are not trivial. They feed back into the structures they observe, validating or testing institutional credibility at every turn. By the midpoint, the tension escalates. Structures that have absorbed centuries of change are pressed by novelty. Procedures strain, loyalties are tested, and the crown itself is a silent arbiter. The heir's posture remains disciplined, yet there is an unmistakable awareness of approaching strain, the point where duty intersects with temptation, and every decision resonates beyond palace walls. Continuity is threatened not by rebellion but by the accumulation of small, deliberate choices, each calibrated to the weight of legacy. Minute 14 approaches the point of no return. It is visible in a subtle glance, in the stillness before council, in the ceremonial repetition. That hides the truth beneath repetition itself. Every advisor, every envoy, understands that at this juncture, compromise is no longer hypothetical. It is concrete, structural, irrevocable. Continuity will survive only if the heir absorbs both consequence and expectation, if the crown is worn as it was intended, not as ornament but as an instrument of governance. By minute 19, foreshadowing threads into the narrative. Future threats loom, political, symbolic, constitutional. They are not distant, they are anticipatory, embedded in treaties, protocols, and the quiet scrutiny of allied nations. Each signal is subtle, each reaction observed, yet all converge on one truth. The institution's survival depends on fidelity to both law and legacy, and the human cost is always implicit. And still, at the close, the crown rests, heavy with promise and peril alike. The heir stands poised, aware that history has paused but not concluded, that the next chapter is unwritten, and that every observer, every structural assessment, every protocol relies upon a delicate balance maintained by discipline, insight, and restraint. The story is not finished. Continuity persists, fragile but resilient, and the world waits quietly, knowing that what comes next cannot be predicted, only respected. The palace corridors stretch onward, a network of stone and shadow where every step carries inherited weight. Portraits watch in silence, their subjects long gone, yet their authority persists. Each frame is a reminder that the crown is never a solitary possession, it is a node in a living network of continuity, succession, and expectation. Decisions made here reverberate outward, shaping not just domestic perception but the quiet calculations of foreign capitals. Every whisper is measured, every gesture observed. National identity is woven into these rituals, and the air moves within them with precise discipline, aware that a misstep, even a subtle hesitation, could ripple through centuries of precedent. Duty outweighs desire. The private self is contained, disciplined, subordinated to a public responsibility that is structural, not sentimental. The forbidden pact remains unspoken in official record, yet its influence is palpable. Advisors and courtiers navigate around it cautiously, aware that even indirect acknowledgement could shift balances of power, perception, and authority. Continuity is not abstract here, it is embodied in visible presence, in the posture of the air, in the arrangement of council and ceremony, in the very cadence of court life. Across the Atlantic, in Washington, Ottawa, and Canberra, analysts interpret subtle signals. In London, observers read ceremonial gestures for insight into succession and stability. In Berlin, constitutional scholars note the tension between tradition and contemporary expectation. Each interpretation shapes diplomatic posture, economic forecasting, and institutional confidence. The crown is a silent emissary of state credibility, its weight felt far beyond palace walls. Minute 12 approaches, and the tension thickens. Historical precedent offers guidance, but precedent is never definitive. Each decision carries consequence, each choice an echo of prior generations. The air confronts not only external expectation but internalized obligation. Continuity demands presence, discipline, and an unwavering absorption of the crown's weight. Desire must be quieted, human hesitation restrained. The institution is paramount, the individual exists within it. And yet, beneath the ceremonial surface, uncertainty persists. There are rooms where questions are deliberately unasked, where advice is hedged and phrasing carefully chosen. The air senses this, aware that even silence carries meaning. Continuity is a living process, fragile, observed, tested, and maintained in equal measure. Every calculated step ensures that history does not unravel, that the crown remains not only a symbol but a functional instrument of governance. The legacy axis continues to unfold. A single secret, held with discretion, shapes the perception of centuries, binding duty to identity, law to expectation. Every observer, domestic and international, witnesses this delicate balance, understanding that the future hinges on decisions made with both prudence and authority. The living thread of continuity stretches onward, threaded through ritual, observation, and unspoken pact. The quiet of early night carries a weight of anticipation. Candles flicker along gilded walls, casting long shadows that echo centuries of precedent. Every reflection, every glint of light on polished surfaces, seems to map the invisible lines of duty, obligation, and continuity. The crown, placed with deliberate precision, is both instrument and witness. It measures not only presence but discipline, absorbing hesitation, amplifying authority. Continuity is not abstract here, it is embodied in every carefully calculated gesture, every conscious breath. Tensions deepen. The forbidden pact exerts a silent pressure, shaping decisions before they are even spoken. Advisors deliberate in measured tones, aware that a misstep, however minor, could unravel the delicate lattice of law, protocol, and perception. Across the Atlantic, Washington reads the signals for geopolitical implications, London observes the balance of ceremonial and structural authority, Berlin scrutinizes the constitutional fidelity on display, Ottawa and Canberra interpret every subtle cue as a reflection of institutional resilience. The crown is a node, connecting domestic continuity to global legitimacy. By minute 22, the point of no return hovers unseen. The air stands at the threshold where every decision carries irreversible consequence, where discretion is both shield and instrument. Desire is restrained, human impulse subordinated to legacy. Each movement, each choice, is an exercise in measured authority, the embodiment of continuity in motion. The institution itself watches, silent but vigilant, ensuring that law, duty, and identity are preserved above personal inclination. The final moments draw near. The palace holds its breath, and with it, history. Foreign capitals register subtle signals, each one a reflection of the crown's perceived stability and the heir's command over inherited authority. The forbidden pact remains partially veiled, yet its presence is undeniable, a test of discretion, endurance, and the capacity to uphold continuity when every observer is watching, when every protocol is observed, and when every expectation is magnified by legacy. The story does not conclude here. The crown endures, heavy with history and responsibility. The heir remains poised, disciplined, yet aware that the narrative continues beyond observation, beyond ceremony, beyond the careful structures of law and tradition. Continuity persists, alive and fragile, in every gesture, every pause, every unspoken acknowledgement. And the world waits, silent, for what comes next, knowing that the resolution is not yet written, that the weight of legacy presses onward, and that the living thread of authority must be sustained in shadow as much as in light. Dawn breaks slowly across the palace, casting pale light over chambers steeped in history. Every surface, marble, gold, tapestry, bears witness to the accumulation of decisions, oaths, and deferred questions. The crown rests quietly, unassuming yet sovereign, a symbol of continuity that is tested with every heartbeat, every careful step, every calculated pause. Continuity is not abstract here, it is tangible, breathing in the stillness, carried in posture, in ritual, in deliberate presence. The forbidden pact lingers, unresolved, shaping the balance of power without declaration. Advisors weigh options, diplomats watch quietly, and foreign capitals, from Washington to London, Ottawa to Berlin, Canberra, register signals of authority, stability, and institutional health. Each subtle gesture of the heir communicates more than words could, maintaining a disciplined equilibrium between duty and the unspoken pressures of secrecy. Minute 24 approaches, and the future hovers at the edge of perception. The heir moves with the measured grace of one who understands that desire is subordinate to history, that the crown demands vigilance above personal will. Every decision, every hesitation, every acknowledgement carries the weight of generations, binding past precedent to present responsibility and the uncertain path ahead. And still, the story is not finished. The crown remains, poised between legacy and uncertainty, the heir standing at the threshold of what has been and what will come. Continuity persists, alive yet fragile, a living testament to discipline, law, and history. Outside observers may analyze, diplomats may conjecture, and time will continue its inexorable passage, but the resolution, the final measure of consequence, has yet to be written. The world waits quietly, aware that what comes next cannot be predicted, only respected.